begin our recording, please.
Recording in progress.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Thursday, June 10th, 2021 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Good afternoon. Keelan, could you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your continued understanding as we manage through these challenges to conduct the city's business. And with that, we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda is available at portlandoregon.gov/order, and it contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you're a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
Thank you. Colleagues, today we're holding a hearing on our amendments to the Design Overlay Zone Amendments Project. It's known as DOZA for short. This is a continuation of the hearing held on May 12th and a discussion we had on May 26th. Keelan, could you read item 447?
Amend the zoning map, Title 33 Planning and Zoning, and Title 32 Signs and Related Regulations to implement the Design Overlay Zone Amendments Project to update the process and tools of the Design Overlay Zone and related code sections.
Thank you. I will turn this over to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff. I believe Laura Lillard is here to describe how we'll spend today's meeting. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
And can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. I'm Laura Patino Lillard, Senior Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We are in the final stretches of the DOZA project. And as you know, DOZA aims to improve every aspect of the design review program, from how projects are reviewed to who reviews them and what criteria are used. I just want to acknowledge our staff team of planners from BPS and BDS. I am presenting on behalf of the great team. We're all here to answer any questions that you have. And we also have staff here from the Transportation and Housing Bureaus. I believe Courtney Duke and Jesse Connor are available in case we need their assistance on some of the amendments. And I want to thank you, commissioners, for your time and attention on this project. So today, I will walk you through the 8 amendments that we were asked to provide. We published these amendments on June the 3rd, and then you'll hear testimony on them today as well. So the exercise that we're going to do right now is that I will very briefly describe each amendment and then give the opportunity for commissioners to move and second each amendment for consideration. This should go fairly quickly so that we can get to the testimony. And we'll do this one at a time for 8 potential amendments. And then after that, I have a quick slide about the timeline, and then we'll hear public testimony. And after public testimony, commissioners will have a chance to discuss and vote on each amendment. Does that sound all right? Okay. So the first amendment is bridges, and this changes the requirement to a design advice request, or DAR, with the Design Commission for bridges with a span of 100 feet, instead of requiring a type 3 design review for bridges with a span of more than 60 feet. And this one is from Commissioner Hardesty. Is there a motion for this amendment?
Yes, I moved.
Oh, you
I'm
were
sorry,
muted.
I remuted. I move the adoption of Amendment 1. The acceptance of Amendment 1.
And is there
A second?
a second?
Second.
Okay. And we'll move to the next one. This amendment moves the positions that were reserved for experts in natural resource management and sustainable building practices into the larger list of development-related experts from which to draw members of Design Commission. Commissioner Ryan?
Yes, so moved.
Second?
And Amendment 3. This amendment is adding an optional standard. It gives a menu of architectural features for projects located on sites in the inner neighborhoods with the center's Main Street overlay, or M overlay. They can choose and receive optional points for providing features listed here. They are not required. Commissioner Maps?
So moved.
Second?
Amendment 4 expands the eligible projects that may choose between a type 2 or a type 3 land use review. And you may recall that a type 2 is a staff review and a type 3 is a public hearing with the Design Commission. This amendment allows projects beyond those receiving city subsidy to those providing 50% of units at or below 60% median family income. And if this amendment passes, the Portland Housing Bureau will need to bring amendments to Title 30 to City Council to make the implementation work. Commissioner Rubio. Okay.
Second?
But before we run through that, could I ask Commissioner Rubio, first of all, I want to thank you for sponsoring this amendment. I think it's an important detail to affordable housing developers in the city. I would be wondering if you would be open to a friendly edit whereby the city requires a design advice request for affordable housing buildings that trigger type 3 design review. In other words, I'm going to make it clear that this is a surgical edit that will help ensure permitting bureaus and commissions connect with these larger size buildings early on. This would only cover buildings that are 65 feet and above outside of the central city and 45 above inside the central city. And I know that staff has some comments on that, but I'm wondering if that's an edit you would consider.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm comfortable with entertaining that edit to amendment number 4.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty, would you be willing to second it with
I
that
will second that, yes.
minor change? Thank you. I appreciate that, Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. And BPS, do you have a copy of what that text looks like that you can put up on the screen, or would you like, or can you put that up on the screen sometime in the next little bit so that people testify about the specific language? That would be great. Otherwise, I can read what I think it is, but ideally people can see it on the screen rather than me read.
I'll bring it up on my
Thank
screen
you,
or
Sandra.
send it
Perfect.
to Laura. I just want to clarify what Mayor Wheeler just said was a little different from what I understood. Mayor Wheeler, is your intent that a project that goes through a type 3 and is
Recording
an affordable
stopped.
and is an affordable housing project that those are required to go through a DAR?
You know,
or,
let me do this because I don't want to do this on the fly and give you inaccurate information. Can we move on to the next one and then I'll come back to that and give you that specific clarification?
yes.
Recording in progress.
Okay. So I'll move on to the next one. And we'll come back to that one.
Thank you.
Amendment number 5 was added as a potential amendment, and this is reduce the threshold for design review from 75 feet to 55 feet, except for projects meeting the affordable housing eligibility requirements similar to amendment number 4. These affordable housing projects would be able to choose to use design standards or go through design review. And this is a change from the recommended draft, which is a threshold of 75 feet for all projects. Commissioner Rubio?
Thank you. This was the matter that was originally discussed when DOZA came up this year. And I wanted, after my office held conversations with multiple stakeholders, it became clear that that this is something that we would be withdrawing. So for this reason, I will not be bringing forward amendment number 5.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Does any other commissioner want to move this amendment for consideration? Okay. Hearing none, I will move on. And Amendment 6 is a set of technical amendments to the recommended draft. These are 6 items that are in need of updates from other projects or corrections and typos. Commissioner Rubio, your hand is still up, but you...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. This is also your amendment.
Yes. Mayor, I move to approve amendment number 6 as drafted.
Second.
Great. Amendment number 7 adds a context standard for new buildings with CM3 zone located on North Interstate between North Lombard and North Ainsworth Streets, shown on the map here for areas with that thick dashed rectangle that are red, which is the commercial mixed use 3. This standard requires ground floor active uses. And for this amendment, actually, staff has a friendly amendment in the standards table to finish a sentence that was, some text was omitted, where it says, this applies under alterations, and there's an unfinished sentence where it says alterations to existing buildings cannot move further out of compliance with, and we would like to just add this standard if this amendment were to be moved. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Ground floor active use is included as optional in the standards, with additional points awarded for projects with affordable ground floor commercial space. I encourage developers to lean into those optional standards and prioritize a vibrant public realm, especially when we're talking about densely populated housing near frequently running transit stops. So that said, after some more dialogue, I am no longer going to sponsor this amendment at this time.
And does any other commissioner want to make a motion for this one? Okay, hearing none. This brings us to the last amendment, number 8. This is an amendment to the adopting ordinance that directs BPS to create character statements during area-specific planning. It's meant to supplement the design guidelines and provide more localized context for new development. And this one is from Mayor Wheeler.
I move it.
I second.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, so let me get back to 4. I don't know if Sam was actually able to get on, but it's my understanding that that is specific to type 2 reviews. Sam, were you able to get on? Sam Diaz? Keelan, did you give him the link?
Mayor Wheeler, maybe I can help out here. I forgot to introduce myself before. Sorry, I'm Sandra Wood with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I got an email from Sam that clarified that yes, indeed, it was for a type 2, which is what we had been discussing earlier today.
Good. I just want to.
I also have the language available. If you prefer me to read it, I can read it. Or
Put it up.
I can bring it up.
Yeah, if you can just bring it up just so people can
Okay.
take a look at it, I think that would be helpful.
Sandra, I stopped sharing. Are you able to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
So there it is. So this is table 825-1 tells us what the procedure types for design review proposals are. And it basically has a footnote number 2, which describes what the procedure is for projects that go through a type 3 review. And this is the language that we had published in gray and that you had discussed last time. It was moved by Commissioner Rubio. And the language in yellow is the friendly amendment that that Mayor Wheeler was proposing, which is that if a project normally would trigger a type 3 design review, in this case, they could choose a type 2 design review if they do all the things in this gray section, and a design advice request is required. See this section of the code, which is the design advice request section, and the application for design review may not be submitted before the required design advice request is held. So that's a friendly amendment.
And just for the record, I just want to confirm, so that is now Amendment 4 because it was a friendly amendment. Is that consistent?
So what Commissioner Rubio's accepting that
Yeah.
friendly amendment?
That's what I heard. Okay, great. Thank you.
And before we go to public testimony, then could you read, there were 2 amendments that are not going to be taken up. Was it, I know one was Amendment 7, was the other Amendment 5? Can you clarify that, please?
That's correct.
Okay, and there were no others, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. So thank you. Does that complete your presentation?
I just had one.
Sure.
Can you see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Just quickly, this is how we expect the rest of the timeline to go. Today, we'll hear testimony on the amendments, and then you'll get to discuss each and vote. We'll come back to you on June 23rd for you to vote on the amended findings, ordinance, and amended recommended draft. And then a final vote will be July 1st for an effective date of August 1st.
Thank you. Keelan, how many people do we have signed up for public testimony?
We have 31 people on the call to testify.
We're going to begin public testimony. Obviously, we have a lot of people signed up, so we encourage everyone to testify, please, only on the amendments. And we are limiting testimony to 2 minutes per person. Thank you, everyone, for your understanding. Keelan, can you kick us off?
And Mayor, I'll just really quick just add and confirm with BPS that the intent is that the written record also closes today when council votes on the amendment, or before council votes on the amendment.
Yeah, we'll close the record after we've heard from everybody. So 2 minutes, name for the record. Keelan, I'll leave it to you to manage.
Thank you, Mayor. I will call the first 3, Heidi Hart, Trisha Patterson, and David Bennig.
Hi, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Heidi Hart. I strongly support Amendment number 4, which would expand Type 2 review for affordable housing that is not subsidized by the city. I think it's great that it would reduce barriers for constructing more affordable housing and more of the city. And I would also like to thank Commissioner Rubio for withdrawing Amendment number 5 and Commissioner Ryan for withdrawing Amendment number 7. Thank you. That's all I have.
Next up, we have Trisha Patterson.
Hi there. Thank you for taking testimony on this. My name is Trisha Patterson, and I'm submitting testimony just on behalf of myself today. I support the recommendations made by the PSC and by Portland Neighbors Welcome. Briefly, I support Amendment 4, and I'm neutral on Amendments 2, 3, and 8. So for Amendment 4, this amendment allows more housing projects to choose between Type 2 and Type 3 review. This amendment also widens the pool of eligible projects by expanding this choice beyond those just that receive city subsidies. So it should be easy to build regulated affordable housing, meaning 60% AMI, regardless of your funding source. So I support this amendment because it gives affordable housing developers more options for how they navigate design review, which in turn makes it more likely that affordable housing will be built. I would like to ask that the DARs, the design advice recommendations, that they be waived for affordable housing developers. I think I heard Mayor Wheeler say this, and I agree. And I would like to thank Commissioner Rubio for withdrawing the proposed Amendment 5, and Commissioner Ryan, thank you for withdrawing Amendment 7. And I would like to make a point in my last minute here about the Design Commission's testimony, and there was a description of buildings that are 75 feet as high rises. This is inaccurate according to state code, which defines a high rise as any occupied floor more than 75 feet above the ground. So if the height limit is 75 feet, then there wouldn't be any occupied floors above 75 feet. So this description is inaccurate. It may be pedantic, but I think it matters what language we're using when describing housing that is desperately needed. So thank you so much for taking testimony, and I really appreciate this time.
David Binnig is next.
Hello, I'm David Binnig. I apologize if I think my daughter was trying to add to our testimony earlier. I also wanted to thank the council members. I was planning to testify with some skepticism on amendments 5 and 7, and was happy to hear those withdrawn. So with that said, I would just add my support for Amendment 4. The more that we can do to create easy and straightforward paths for people who are trying to provide more of that affordable housing, the better. That's really all that I have left to say today. Thank you.
The next three we have are Mark Wyman, Johan Hannesson, and Peggy Moretti.
Hi, I'm Mark Wyman, testifying on behalf of the Arbor Lodge Neighborhood Association. I don't know if there's still merit in offering my testimony. I hope that you'll read the public record where a multitude of Arbor Lodge residents, including business owners and housing developers, were offering testimony in favor of number 7. This is, I'm going to swallow my disappointment, but I'll just offer up our perspective here. The perspectives here that promoting active use works in opposition to encouraging more housing. There's no evidence that's been offered on the public record to suggest that that will be the case. All we need to do is use our own eyes. This modest requirement of 25% active use is present to the north and south of our neighborhood. And you can see with your own eyes that there's plenty of new housing coming online, including 100% affordable housing. And moreover, we as a city, when we look at our social, our economic, and our environmental challenges, this dynamic where we pit two forms of public good against each other in a zero-sum dynamic, it's not going to get us anywhere. There's an underlying cynicism that we can't advance multiple objectives in concert with each other, that they have to work in opposition with each other. That is not good for our city, and certainly not good for our neighborhood. Secondarily, we were hoping to plan for success. The assertion that storefronts would reside empty while we're on pace to double the population of our neighborhood really has no merit. We're losing public space as we add population. And finally, there were comments addressing the localized approach. This area, again, using your own eyes, is different because it has the light rail line. Collectively, we've all invested millions of dollars to put that infrastructure in to provide housing dense and service rich zones. And now, unfortunately, that promise will not come to fruition. Additionally, there's an urban renewal area here that was meant to support business opportunities, in particular for minority and women-owned enterprises. We were hoping that this would be a home for businesses graduating from the Williams Russell Incubator, a wonderful project coming online by virtue of the urban renewal area that we were hoping would find a home in Arbor Lodge with new commercial spaces. So I'm over time here. I apologize for the kind of negative tone here, but we're profoundly disappointed that we didn't have a chance to provide our testimony and have it be factored into the decision. I hope you read the public comments, the written comments. There's many of them. More than half are from our neighborhood in support of this testimony. The fact that some who have closer access to elected officials superseded a public dialogue is profoundly disappointing. The fact that we're pitting public benefits against each other is a failure of leadership. We need to work together to advance our objectives in concert with one another. And I hope that we'll be able to do that in other areas of public policy. Thank you.
Next up, we have Johan Hannesson.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Perfect. Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, my name is Johan Hannesson. I'm a volunteer and lobbyist for Portland Neighbors Welcome, and I'm testifying today on its behalf. We are a grassroots, pro-housing, pro-tenant organization dedicated to ensuring that all Portlanders can find and keep safe, stable, and affordable homes. We believe DOZA is poised to greatly improve the design review process and encourage more abundant and more affordable housing that Portland desperately needs. This is why we strongly support Amendment Number 4, which allows Type 2 design review to be an option for affordable housing that isn't directly subsidized by Portland. This is a simple change that will create flexibility for affordable housing developers and is one that is strongly supported by members of our coalition, including Bridge, Catholic Charities, Innovative Housing, Reach CDC, Rose CDC, and others. Please pass Amendment Number 4 with Mayor Wheeler's recommended changes. We would also like to thank commissioners and staff for the productive conversations with housing providers and advocates around Amendments Number 5 and Number 7, and careful consideration of their impacts on both affordable and mixed income housing. We are neutral on the remaining proposed amendments, and with these recommended changes, we are confident adopting DOZA will help us take another step towards addressing Portland's housing shortage. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next up, we have Peggy Moretti.
Hi, I'm Peggy Moretti. I am representing Restore Oregon today. I wanted to thank the council members for listening to the input from the last round of our hearing. And I have to say I'm profoundly disappointed in the withdrawal of Amendment Number 5, because it just seems nuts to me that good design is somehow becoming the enemy of development moving forward. It's just a false narrative. Originally, I was going to testify in support of all of these amendments, and I will zero in on the ones on a couple of them specifically that remain here. Restore Oregon strongly supports Amendment Number 3, the Main Street Standards Bundle. We applaud the effort to identify additional design standards that will increase the quality of design within the M overlay through the use of proportionally designed ground floor storefront systems and other style neutral elements. It's not clear to us why that compliance with these standards is optional, as they provide a very sound menu for development teams to choose from. Because the sound design principles these standards represent and the relative rarity of the M overlay zone, Restore Oregon would suggest that the Main Street Standards Bundle be offered as an optional points throughout the D overlay zone, and that 4 points from this list be required in the M overlay zone. Anybody who wanted to deviate from these low or no cost standards could elect to use the alternative path. We strongly supported Amendments 4 and 5 because we thought it did a great job of incentivizing affordable housing and requiring design review for those projects that were over 55 feet. The reason we felt so strongly about that is that the context in these neighborhoods is of, at the maximum, a 4-story building typically. And so buildings that were going to be so dramatically larger deserved some additional design consideration and thoughtfulness. And because when developers come in, and these are not the affordable housing projects that we were talking about, there's more and more out-of-state developers coming in who really don't know anything about these communities and are only there to make as much profit as possible. So we felt that design review was very, very appropriate. So we're very disappointed in that. Restore Oregon strongly supports Amendment 8, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for adding that, the creation of area-specific character statements. We feel it's critical for City Council to direct the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to work with communities on character statements and design standards, because every community deserves to have its unique character heritage, cultural heritage, reflected and respected through the design of the new buildings going in. Without the creation of area-specific character statements and standards, design decisions we left to market rate developers who, unlike many of our affordable housing providers, often lack the necessary lived experience or motivation to design with community in mind. We believe every area, every community is entitled to high quality design. And so we urge you to please do direct BPS to develop those context statements and standards, and to start with those communities who've been least represented in the process to date. Thank you.
Next up, we have Mary Vogel, Heather S. Chato, and Eben Hoffer.
Good afternoon, councilors and Mayor Wheeler. I'm Mary Vogel, a CNU accredited professional testifying on behalf of myself and my small planning consulting business, Plan Green. As you know, CNU is focused on urban design. In fact, it founded the movement toward form-based codes in order to allow developers and neighborhoods more certainty in the development process, thereby reducing costs. DOZA is the closest Portland has gotten to developing a form-based code, and I have been involved in helping shape it over the last 5 years. Let me share with you this part of an email I received yesterday from architect Ralph Tyrone, the T in OTAC, although he is on his own now, who is leading the construction of 89 unsubsidized 60% AMI units across I-405 from my neighborhood and the PSU campus. Today's market is very tough. We cannot do anything about materials costs or labor costs. So the only thing left is timing. And Portland is notoriously famous for being one of the most laborious, time-consuming processes on the West Coast. And for what reason? I do work up and down the coast, and even in places like Denver, I can do 2 or 3 projects there in the time it takes to do one project in Portland. And I would put the quality of those projects up against any of those we go through in Portland in design quality. I will attach his entire email shared with his permission to my written testimony. While I was hoping to see no further amendments so DOZA can be adopted, I can throw some support to Amendment 4 as long as it would cover unsubsidized projects like Tyron's in the overlay zone. Tyron's is not, but in any case, I remain neutral about amendments 1, 2, and 3, and strongly oppose 1, 2, and 6, and strongly oppose Amendment 3 for reasons that my Portland Neighbor Welcome colleagues have mentioned in their testimony. Amendment 7, spot zoning for Overlook neighborhood after they killed a proud brown projects supported by so many leaders of the Black community is unconscionable. I oppose Amendment 8, character statements for each neighborhood, as those would slow down the DOZA adoption process and will likely be used to tie up a project until it is no longer feasible. Minneapolis-based Neighbors for More Neighbors had a poster showing a gay man with his partner in the background. They had just bought a home. The poster read something like, when he starts to bring up neighborhood character, talk to him about equitable zoning. I also refer you to Sarah Marson's excellent efforts to dismantle historic preservation as we know it. Character is so tied to historic preservation that it is hard to separate the two, and she is leading the historic preservation community effort to develop an anti-racist historic preservation resource list. Keeping in mind Tehran's words above, please pass DOZA without further delay. It has been 5 years in the making. Thank you.
Next up, we have Heather S. Chato.
Hi, might I share my screen to show you some slides?
You're muted, Heather.
Hi there. I started again. My name is Heather Flynn Chato. I'm an urban planner and environmental designer. I used to work in local government doing long-range planning and comprehensive development. And I have a small sustainable design firm. I've been doing community engagement and planning for 20 years. And I'm also the Richmond Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair and the co-founder of the Portland Main Street Design Initiative. We work to raise communities' design literacy so they have an opportunity to participate in the processes that impact them with the language that they need. Language is so incredibly important. And I would caution you about judging people that talk about character or compatibility, because that is the language that communities have. They don't have the ability to speak with the same language that others do. And so it often gets misperceived. So I would like to offer, this opportunity for us to work better at our language. We work to be a bridge to communities to help them really understand how to make good density, and that it's not an enemy, that it really impacts. The design is not about style. We are almost never talking about that. So that often gets misunderstood, but really how we can foster better density with greater community support and faster processes that have better results with developers and designers and can turn out more cost efficient. We would like to support Amendment 3 and want to thank very strongly Commissioner Mapps for championing this. This is very important to many, many communities, as we've had 12 adopted Main Street guidelines for 12 streets by 9 neighborhood and business associations. We'd also like to encourage you to support Amendment 8 with an additional focus on the other future work of the Centers of Centers. And then as you look at the Main Street standards, you consider, as Peggy Kendall said, that you make these optional everywhere. In the D overlay. Why should we be excluding others from that? We've also proposed an affordable design standard that hasn't shown up, but we've been working with Walsh Construction, who builds a significant amount of affordable housing, and we've drawn from their cost efficiency for affordable design and construction. This is an example of a building that was built with no additional cost above typical construction. This is the actual language that we've proposed and given you examples of why and how design works to do these things. Design is not a fluffy thing that is the icing on the cake, but it is very tied to the functionality, and many of those features in the Main Street bundle, there's a real purpose to that fosters better functional buildings, and we'd love an opportunity to talk to you about that. We've had a significant amount of growth and change on division. And I want to highlight that that the concerns that communities have had were not about density. There is a big misunderstanding and this labeling and shaming of people using NIMBY language. It's a little bit form of hate speech and shaming people, when really the significant part of this was that communities were concerned about architecture and design and losing their identity and losing the things that were important to them and not having a voice in major redevelopment. When I was a planner, we had a cumulative impacts report that came out quarterly. So I know as you're looking for tools, this is a real tool that look at how can, 2 developers that each had 3 buildings at the same time significantly overnight change the character of a place without communities having a meaningful voice. That is really concerning. So we can foster that support for density when done well, but only one of these is context sensitive. It's not about the density. I really want to bring that home. This is really about design, and it's not about making it look old. It's not about making it not stopping development or change, but really making sure that there's a process in place for communities. And I want to dispel these myths. These buildings both relate to the Main Street pattern language. They both fit within those. They work with all of those, but they relate to the patterns. But there's an unaddressed impact on these main streets. And this is from a presentation in the mixed use zoning process, where I think things went a little bit awry because staff recommended 3 stories with a bonus to 4. And that was overruled by the Planning Commission, and it was bumped up for 4 stories to a bonus to 5. The density is not a problem, but when you have these unintended consequences, and I encourage you to look more than just height thresholds, but look at the width and look at the square footage, because the impacts on these small places have not been measured on 5,000 square foot lots.
Excuse me, Heather, I apologize for interrupting. You had 2 minutes and
I apologize. I wasn't sure if my time got slowed down by trying to get my slides.
It feels like you have a lot to say, and
I'm so sorry to go over.
I'd be happy to get that information later, but we have a lot of people waiting to
Thank you very much. I appreciate your listening, and I hope that you will consider adding this other future work. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Evan Hoffer.
We'll extend the timeline for comments too. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eben Hoffer. I'm talking to you from Music Portland and the Music Portland Policy Council, and here to make a little comment on Amendment number 8. We don't have a position on whether 8 should be approved or not, but if it is, we'd like to ask Council to require that such character statements consider an area's live culture. Music and gathering places are part of the character in the context of a neighborhood. We're a city of music and culture, of people meeting together to exchange ideas, see things in new ways. And if we're going to move to define the character of neighborhoods in qualitative terms, these values in this character should be included. This is particularly important in the context of a land use conversation, public assembly, which is meeting together in actual physical space, if you can imagine that. It's conditioned on the built environment. Live events are impacted by the layout of public space, by transportation, by acoustic standards of construction. And this is important pretty much everywhere in the design overlay zone, from downtown to Gateway. So we say build on context for all sorts of reasons. That context usually means things that you see with your eyes. And we just ask that you also consider the things of our ears. This work that is being done with DOZA is fabulous. We're extremely in support and the expansive way of thinking about what is important and who's included and where we can live to have a vibrant creative community in town. Let's make sure that we talk about that creative work if we're defining neighborhoods. Should Council today vote to direct BPS to create character statements, we urge you to explicitly require the agency consider live culture in all described areas. Thank you.
Next up, we have Luke Norman, Michael Anderson, and Henry Kramer. Luke, are you able to unmute? Looks like you're on a phone. You might need to hit *6. Luke may be having, oh, there we go. Are you able to?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, Luke, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Luke Norman, and I'm a volunteer lobbyist with Portland Neighbors Welcome, but here today speaking on behalf of myself. I want to thank Council for developing these amendments in conversation with the community, with a special focus on providing options that maintain our high design expectations while not discouraging affordable and mixed income housing. Thank you to Commissioners Rubio and Ryan for listening to the community and withdrawing amendments number 5 and 7. I encourage Council to pass DOZA with amendment number 4 to give affordable housing options as it moves through the design review process. Any building that's ensuring that at least half of its housing is affordable at or below 60% of the median family income should have the same options as a project subsidized by the city. I also echo the support of Housing Oregon for this amendment. Thank you.
Next up, we have Michael Anderson.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Michael Anderson from Sightline Institute, a regional sustainability think tank. I live in the Cully neighborhood in Northeast Portland. Thanks for all the time you and city staff have spent dealing with what you may have noticed is a surprising amount of drama around this policy. I'm speaking in favor of Amendment 4, an important way to prioritize affordable housing in this process while improving the staff workflow behind the scenes. I think it's been well vetted with affordable housing pros. We're opposed to the previously proposed Amendment 7, and which was also unanimously opposed by affordable housing builders that I spoke with at least, and Amendment 5. Even if personalities and idiosyncrasies don't at some point shape the discretionary design review process itself, drama does regularly intervene in the form of appeals, regardless of the merit of those appeals. City data show that over the past 8 years, 1 in 12 housing projects that could be appealed by the project were appealed. That's 20 times the rate of non-housing projects. And that data doesn't include the new appeal of a housing project filed just last week. Those appeals are relevant not just for their own costs, which are built into the prices that people pay for those units, but for the leverage they create, though not for all neighbors. Only neighbors who can credibly threaten appeal have leverage. I'll quote one person I heard from, former executive director of REACH CDC, Ed McNamara: "Regulated affordable housing alone won't solve our need for housing." Like McNamara, I completely feel that does not deny the huge urgency of creating regulated affordable housing, especially in our most exclusive areas. But from the perspective of ordinary Portlanders, market rate homes have a very important role too. Every home that exists in a new 7-story building provides a home for a relatively well-off household. If those homes don't exist, those relatively well-off households will be competing with every other Portlander for the homes that already exist. That's how we get price hikes and rent crises. Thank you so much for your time and expertise on this issue.
Next up, we have Henry Kramer.
Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, my name is Henry Kramer. I'm a homeowner in the Elliott neighborhood of Northeast Portland. I'm also a volunteer lobbyist for Portland Neighbors Welcome, but speaking only for myself here. I'm in favor of Amendment 4 and thankful to Commissioner Rubio and Commissioner Ryan for withdrawing Amendments 5 and 7. And I'm neutral on the remaining amendments. Mostly, I just want to applaud you for the thoughtful consideration of feedback and how hard you and your offices worked to get this right. I know this was really hard and sticky. And you clearly listened to the community and to experts, and you put so much thought into finding a solution that incorporates good design advice and prioritizes building much needed affordable and mixed income housing. I especially want to applaud your embrace of options. Options make a place vibrant. Mandates make a place homogenous and risk killing new housing efforts. I'm so glad you're choosing options. Groups like Pdx Main Street have offered a lot of design ideas they clearly feel incredibly strongly about. And personally, I don't hate their ideas. I like their ideas. But mandates would have made it harder to build much needed housing. Adding options as standards ensures their ideas are included now and into the future in new development processes. A mandate would risk nothing getting built. An option makes it more likely that what does get built gets built at all and includes their ideas. And as we're talking about options, I'd just like to note that any new building in Arbor Lodge will have the option for ground floor retail. If it pencils out, it'll be included, and it'll only pencil out if there's enough people living in Arbor Lodge to make a retail shop work, which works if more housing gets built. A mandate would stop new housing from being built there. An option keeps it on the table. So thank you so much for working so hard to get this right. Please pass DOZA as amended with Amendment 4. And thank you so much for your work on this.
Next up, we have Doug Klotz, David Scholheimer, and Kate Widows.
There. Hi, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. I'm Doug Klotz. I support Amendment number 4, which would expand the funding sources that the project can use for affordable housing and qualify for using Type 2 on all of those projects. I welcome the tweaks that have been made that will make this work. This will allow an expedited path for projects with half the units at 60 MFI or below. And I thank all involved for getting that option there. And I thank the commissioners for withdrawing Amendment 7, as Henry was talking about. The optional storefront space is one thing, and mandating it may be more problematic. I also am glad to see that number 5 has been withdrawn, because there's a lot of issues about that would end weigh heavily on the building of houses. I just wanted to make one other comment, so I have a little bit of time. The character statements, Kat Schultz made this would be number 8, character statements. At the last meeting, Kat Schultz had a succinct description of how character statements would ideally work, as they would be short statements, maybe three or four sentences, and reflecting the character as described in character of our neighborhood, as in small markers or little signs or something that's unique to the neighborhood. And as a matter of fact, the other speakers talked about the cultural characteristics. So that's also something that could be in character statements. But we should make sure that character statements do not include any reference to building height, setbacks, or FAR, as these are approved they're determined by the comp plan zoning. I'm afraid to say that I don't think the macadam statement is a good model for this, because it has some of those references sneaked in. But if we have a good process for the character statement and adhere to some guidelines for what they should include, I think those can be a useful thing. So thank you very much.
Next up is David Scholhamer.
David Scholhamer with the Selwood Moreland Improvement League, better known as SMILE. We support Amendment 3. Over 50 Selwood Moreland residents and the Selwood Moreland Business Alliance testified in support of adding Main Street design standards to DOZA. Amendment 3 somewhat fulfills the DOZA tenet of building on context by adding optional Main Street design standards to the center's Main Street overlay zone. Amendment 3 will help reduce building costs because it provides more options for developers to choose from, which enables them to pick lower cost options as market forces and costs change. Recall that DOZA already has 17 required standards and 45 optional standards for developers to choose from to earn points, like elective classes in school. So Amendment 3 would add one more elective for developers to choose from. We are disappointed that the technical amendments do not correct all of the known flaws in the DOZA design standards, largely due to lack of testing in the RM1 zone and for 5,000 square foot lots. In one last appeal to good governance, we ask that you add 2 non-controversial technical amendments provided in our written testimony. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kate Widows.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, hi, I'm Kate Widows and I represent Pdx Neon. We're a local advocacy group dedicated to protecting and preserving historic neon signs with the aim of preventing Portland's dwindling collection of beautiful historic neon signage from being erased from our landscape. So the changes we are proposing for the DOZA amendments package will not only help save Portland's beautiful neon signs from the wrecking ball, but will also support the work of local highly skilled craftspeople in our city who make, repair, and restore these one-of-a-kind signs by hand every day. Signs like the glorious Laurelhurst Theater, the dazzling White Stag rooftop sign, and George Moreland's Dancing Water Heater King. So on to the list of changes we propose. Under item 6, we'd like to correct the design guideline language regarding neon signs to be more general by removing the term sculptural. We'd also like to amend the language encouraging retention of character defining details for storefront retrofits by adding the term vintage signage to the list of details. In item number 3, we'd like to include additional standards requiring the preservation of historic neon signs and include encouragement for the creation of new neon signage. And finally, in regards to item number 8, we're highly in support of creating the creation of character statements, and we'd like to make sure that neon signage is addressed in these statements. Thank you very much for your time. I think that's it for me.
Next up, we have Dave Ott, Chandra Robinson, and Patrick.
Greetings, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Dave Oddie, and I'm an owner of Host Architecture, and I design affordable housing. I'm testifying about Amendment number 5 and urge you to deliberate it today. I was chair of the AIA Urban Design Panel at the beginning of DOZA with Mark Hinshaw's report over 6 years ago, and I've been intimately involved with every iteration over the years. Yet even with my insider's perspective and privilege, I was surprised by the PSC's recommended change from 55 feet to 75 feet. This change was made in a vacuum after public testimony that was not done in good faith with the neighborhoods that helped craft the visions for their corridors. Amendment 5 will render design review meaningless in the neighborhoods. I've said this to you before, and I will say it again. Architecture is a subjective endeavor that requires discussion, collaboration, and compromise. Architecture is not paint by numbers. Please don't let pro formas and checklists replace public input and discussion about neighborhood context. Design review doesn't take more time and money. permitting does. Removing design review from our corridors in favor of a checklist is simply lazy, and Portland deserves better. Thank you.
Next up, we have Chandra Robinson.
Thank you. I'm testifying in regard to amendment number 5. My name is Chandra Robinson, and I am a principal at Lever Architecture, and I'm also a member of the Design Commission, but I'm testifying today just as myself. And amendment number 5 lowers the threshold for public design review for affordable housing. And I request that you reconsider this and deliberate on it again today. A 7-story building is 1 story shorter than Bud Clark Commons. A 7-story building is exactly the same size as the new building proposed at the corner of Hancock and Flint in the Rose Quarter, which I know that council has seen. The impact of a 7-story building is, it cannot be underestimated. It's very great on a neighborhood. Do you really want to see 7-story buildings spring up around Portland when the residents have not had the opportunity to come to a hearing and express their thoughts on how that building impacts the context, character, and the feel of their neighborhood? I've been in front of this council before and have testified that different projects meet the design guidelines with different levels of success. Some projects respond to context or public realm better than others, but all projects that are approved through the public design review process, those meet the design guidelines. And having been in front of you before, I have heard from City Council that you would like us to be tougher on projects and get teams to deliver better designs. It's very frustrating to me personally that you would ask me to be tougher on design teams and ask me now to let affordable housing projects get permitted without this design review process at all. Those requests are totally contradictory. Are we supposed to be tougher in the central city and Gateway and nowhere else because those areas are less important? I personally want more affordable housing because I grew up in affordable housing and I know how important it is to families. I want affordable housing to be as well considered as every other project so that I cannot tell one from the other walking down the street. I want it to be so good that homeowners are excited to have a new building in their neighborhood. If you reduce the threshold for design review, affordable housing will be resented in neighborhoods. It will be resented because neighbors don't get to be part of the public process. And it will be resented because small changes to a big building could have made the housing fit in better. If you're concerned about the time it takes, please consider an amendment that shortens the process. Don't consider eliminating it for buildings up to 7 stories. Once a new project is built, it's too late to take it back and residents are stigmatized. The neighborhood character is changed for good. Thank you.
Next up, we have Patrick.
Thank you for allowing me to speak here. This city council at this time period in history, you are the make it or break it council. You've inherited a beautiful city that attracts people from all over the world to come here to spend money. And this DOZA thing and the 7 stories on Alberta Hawthorne, and you're targeting areas that you should not be targeting for redevelopment. We got so much other open space for that you could do that in, and concentrate on affordable housing. I've heard from one of the other speakers, architecture is not subjective, or it is subjective. No, there are objective principles of architecture that you can go back till the beginning of man that are still in place. And the city that we have inherited and you are in charge of, and you're going to make the decision what happens to this city. There are worldwide principles and designs that are not culturally based. They're based on the human scale, the size of a human being. That's why these areas are so vital to our city, and they attract tourism, and they also help the hospitality industry and the tourism industry and the film and TV industry thrive here. This is $1 billion industry for film and TV. It's I don't know how much it is in tourism, and if you're talking about the working class and you care about the working class, they need those jobs, and we need people to visit Portland, and we need these areas to remain vital. And turning these into just 7-story corridors like Division, it's the death of Portland in a way, really, because people are going to come here and they're going to tell their friends it's really not that great of a place to visit. I'm in support of Amendment 3, 5, 8, and adding the PDX Main Streets Affordable Design Standards. And please take care of these areas, okay? The working class of Portland is depending on you to take care of Portland so that we can have jobs and have these local businesses and places to visit and places to walk where we don't have to spend money to have fun. That's what these areas are like. I lived in Houston where there's no zoning. You need money to have fun in Houston. So please, take your time on these Main Street vintage areas. Thank you.
Next up, we have Carrie Richter, Carrie Waltz, and Julie Livingston.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, my name is Carrie Richter. I am a land use attorney and a proud resident who lives near Southeast 82nd Avenue, Portland's Outer East Side. I'm also a former Portland Landmarks Commissioner. What I can tell you from all of this work is that protecting cultural and architectural heritage is not a privilege to be enjoyed by the few who can afford ownership, but rather a right that must be conferred to every individual Portlander. Providing much needed housing need not strip the city of memory, context, and diversity to satisfy the whims of market rate developers. When it comes to design, we have a two-track system, and both tracks should result in good outcomes, with larger market rate projects needing public input so as not to steamroll the community. Tenants, just like owners, deserve good design and should be involved in the process to develop character statements and comment on proposed new buildings. These amendments together move towards striking the appropriate balance, setting the table for future area plans that must prioritize underrepresented areas of the city and be driven by community. Specifically, I want to urge the strong support for Amendment number 8, area-specific character statements. An example of where character statements represent a great opportunity is Southeast 122nd Avenue. In 2010, the city completed the Southeast 122nd Corridor Study, a pilot project that sought to identify ingredients from the community that would make the street more, quote, convenient, livable, and healthy. With respect to livability, the report found that, quote, Douglas fir trees are a character-defining asset for the area, along with community parks, the Springwater Corridor, Leach Botanical Garden, and the area's schools. They create some of the area's key amenities. Yet despite the design overlay zone being present at Southeast 122nd and Division, and it's Stark, the DOZA amendments fail to recognize these critical key character-defining features important to the community. Furthermore, the 2010 study noted the lack of inventory or evaluation of cultural or historic resources along this corridor, something that must be done, not just along Southeast 122nd, but in other areas like Lentz, Park Rose, and St. John's, each of which are in the design overlay zone, but lack any area-specific standards or guidance.
Point of order, please.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. If we continue to let people go over, we'll be here all night. And I hope people will respect the 2-minute limit that you placed at the beginning of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, please acknowledge the character and heritage of all of Portland's unique communities by directing BPS to develop community-driven context statements and design standards for Portland's unique areas. Thank you.
Next up, we have Carrie Waltz.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Carrie Waltz. I'm a local architect in town and a board member of NOMA Pdx, the National Organization of Minority Architects Local Chapter. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the DOZA package of proposals. I'm here to testify against Amendment number 5 and urge you to lower the recommended review threshold of 75 feet for projects outside the central city. DOZA points out that the design of places is important because people experience their built environment every day. But it's so much more than that. The built environment reflects the process of imagining, making, and maintaining spaces. Architecture constitutes a language that communicates social meaning. The design review process is critical to knitting buildings into the character of our neighborhood and upholding our communal responsibilities in building our city. DOZA seeks to establish review thresholds based on the size and scale of a project with the goal of aligning the level of review with the project's level of impact. The 75-foot threshold does not fulfill this goal. The design overlay was expanded as part of the Mixed-Use Zones project in 2016, and this directed Portland's anticipated growth to newly designated neighborhood centers. In this process, communities were promised a voice in developing their neighborhoods through design review in exchange for increased height and density. The height threshold was introduced following all public testimony on the proposed draft, and these council hearings are the first opportunity for public input. A 75-foot threshold breaks the promise of design review for all of the 4, 5, and 6-story buildings and eliminates opportunities for public engagement on projects that directly impact our communities. Design review provides a public forum that centers the voices of those affected, prioritizes the design's impact on the community, and builds neighborhoods through an accountable, accessible, and collaborative process. As Design Commissioner Robinson pointed out in past testimony, community engagement is how those who serve the city are confronted with the inequities they weren't aware of. We cannot move away from processes that improve equitable outcomes. We must move towards them. Thank you.
Next up, we have Julie Livingston.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for taking additional testimony today. I hope you've had a chance to read the recent written testimony provided by the Design Commission. It was signed by the Design Commission, the Landmarks Commission, and many developers and architects who work in Portland. My first comment is about Amendment number 5, which I urge you to deliberate today. Recent discussion and testimony might lead you to believe the Design Commission was party to the creation of objective standards appropriate for buildings that are 75 feet tall. This isn't the case. For the duration of the Design Commission's work on DOZA, the height threshold was established at 55 feet. 75 feet was introduced after the collaborative process had concluded. The proposed context-related standards aren't strong when applied to 55-foot tall buildings. They're weak when applied to 75-foot tall buildings. In 2016, BPS hired a consultant to assess Portland's design review process, and that consultant's report was adopted by Council in April 2017, a full 18 months after the housing emergency was declared. The DOZA recommended draft and Council's amendments have drifted from the scope established in that initial report. The number 1 stated priority reads as follows: adjust the thresholds for design review to provide a high level of review for larger projects in D overlay districts, but lessen the review for smaller projects. The D overlay exists only in our city's most sensitive neighborhood centers, and only the discretionary design review track has the ability to deliver a place-specific response to a community's culture, history, and character. The de facto elimination of design review outside the central city and gateway is presented as urgent when in fact this idea was not present in DOZA discussions prior to council hearings, and its impact is unclear. But we do know it will accelerate the loss of culturally specific places in Portland. With respect to Amendment number 4, thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for recognizing the value of a design advice request. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Amy Wilson, Rocky Johnson, and Michelle Planbeck.
Can you hear me? Is this Amy Wilson? Or it is Amy Wilson. Here we go. Thank you, councilors. I initially joined to support amendments 3, 5, and 8. Pretty disappointed that 5 is not up for discussion anymore. I felt like it was important for the reasons that the previous testimony explained. My testimony today, instead of addressing the specific details, is I'd like to get the council's attention to recognize the results of policies like DOZA. I would like to just communicate with you guys as humans, all of us humans living in this place. How do we measure our success with planning policies? Obviously, we clearly need to address the crisis of affordability, and we all want to address that situation. But it seems to someone like me that the only measurement of success is tracking the number of units created at all costs. Design doesn't seem to be compatible with affordable housing, but it's not a zero-sum game, as they're saying. There seems to be little consideration for what it's like to live with the results of buildings that get built with only quantitative goals. We have to bring in this notion of quality, or who's going to want to live there. When we created Division Street or a Williams, is that success? Or as Commissioner Hardesty likes to say, for whom? For whom is this success? When we don't plan carefully and just build, baby, build, we get places like William Street where no one is happy with the results. Set aside that it's a recolonization and complete erasure of the historical African-American business community, and just imagine that you're a neighbor having to look up at those good Soviet bunkers every day. Without planning, we eradicate our sense of community, our sense of place. Buildings continue to pop up with no sensitivity to context, no connection to or recognition of what makes a special place, because we let them. How many of us have been driving down the street and suddenly go, where'd that come from? As a long-term Portlander, I used to love to explore our city. Now I have a growing list of places that I need to avoid, unfortunately. I live in the King neighborhood neighborhood. I'm sorry, that clock's bothering me. And the new buildings on Alberta that we have allowed do not enhance our historical community. Instead, they look like something out of downtown Chicago or New York City. There's one going up that's breaking ground between 11th and 12th. It's going to have 144 luxury Airbnb units and a health spa. That's not housing. That's not affordable. How does that serve us? When do we get to stop feeling like this rushed development is happening to us instead of with us? So please, I'm begging. This is so important. We've got to slow down. We've got to be more thoughtful and realize that these are consequences that we're going to live with for a very long period of time. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Next up, we have Rocky Johnson.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Oh, great. I'm Rocky Johnson with SMILE, and I want to urge you to support the Main Street Standards Amendment number 3. These are optional building standards, and they will encourage better solar access, diversity of building materials, and better landscaping. And these are all universal building features, and they will not make it harder to build housing, but they will encourage building diversity and reduce the current trend of big gray box buildings with few windows and no landscaping. Thank you.
Next up, we have Michelle Planbeck.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Michelle.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Planbeck, and I'm here today as a registered representative of Oregon Smart Growth, a group of civically minded, responsible developers invested in allied industries. Oregon Smart Growth has shared feedback throughout the DOZA project and appreciates that some of our concerns have been addressed, and in particular appreciates Amendment 5 being tabled. We need more housing at all levels of affordability, and Amendment 5 would run counter to that. Oregon Smart Growth also appreciates the conversations regarding design review requests and agrees that they should remain voluntary. What we're asking for is a technical fix to strike or otherwise clarify the intent from the recommended draft language that reads that it limits the design advice request meetings to 1 meeting per application. Additional meetings may be granted for proposals that include more than 1 building on site, to allow for projects to make more efficient use of the design review stage by utilizing a second design advice request when needed and at the applicant's discretion and cost. We really are grateful to the staff, to electeds, both in voluntary positions and otherwise, for their work on the project, which is really great. And wanted to also mention that in addition to this testimony, Oregon Smart Growth supports Portland Neighbors Welcome and Michael's advocacy in particular on DOZA that you've just heard. And agrees with the testimony on character statements and the intention not to add another layer of complexity. And wanted to add a quick plug for the Up for Growth calculator here locally that was locally developed with the City of Portland. Their feedback, your all's feedback to be able to create a resource and a dynamic model that uses detailed local market data to represent the real world housing conditions. And that may have been of help here as well. And so with that, I just wanted to thank you for your time and really are grateful for all the work that's been done on DOZA.
Next up, we have Roger Jones, Tom DeCara, and Sam Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Roger Jones, and about half of my life has been spent on Hawthorne. So I'm just kind of here to remind us that way back in the old days, about 35 years ago, it was 1986 when the mayor and the city of Portland invested in the National Main Street Urban Center designation for Hawthorne Boulevard. We've been 35 years trying to get conservation district, 35 years trying to get, trying to save our buildings and avoid the kind of accidents that have occurred of late. I really appreciate the work of Commissioner Mapps to bring the main streets to the fore. Amendment 3 is an excellent piece. And specifically, Mayor, thank you for your bringing the character statements and the visual preferences that we need to have to the fore. That's a very key piece. And if I had my druthers, I'd give the rest of my time back to Heather Flint Chotto so that she could finish her presentation. There are people with such passion that need to be heard, and they're not being heard. And the decision to have 2 minutes of testimony, I'm actually, I seriously am just going to give the rest of my time back to everybody because it's so important to you guys. So have a good day.
Next up, we have Tom DeCaro.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tom DeCaro, owner and principal at Cam Pacific. I've been an active housing developer in Portland for many years. I'll admit that I'm not as highly versed in the fine-grained details of all these DOZA amendments discussed today as some, but I did want to testify in general against relaxing design review requirements for affordable housing projects. These efforts may be well-meaning, but I believe they will result in unintended negative consequences for Portland over the long term. All buildings, particularly large buildings, have a long-term impact on their surrounding context, regardless of their use or rent structure. I don't believe we should be allowing large projects in D zones and specifically buildings to 75 feet tall to avoid full design review scrutiny under the guise of affordability. All buildings should receive the same level of scrutiny in my view. This is more important than ever as large projects are increasingly being proposed in close-in, lower density neighborhoods. Successful projects in these neighborhoods locations require nuance, thoughtful design, good urban planning, and quality long-lasting architecture. These goals and standards are less likely to be met with lesser scrutiny and less public process. It's a false choice that you can't have good design and affordability at the same time. You have only to look at close-in East Side at new buildings just outside the D overlays to see what you get without design review. Upper Sandy Boulevard, for example, is becoming a showcase of bad architectural design, affordable or not. Type 3 design review works. It's not always easy or fun or quick, but I've yet to have a project not happen because of design review in my 25 years building housing in the city. Personally, I think we should be lowering the DR trigger based on height and expanding D overlays into close-in neighborhoods, not watering down the requirements. The same rules should apply to all developments in the public realm, and we should maintain a high bar on all publicly financed projects. To maintain the Portland we love, we should stay focused on well-designed residential communities that withstand the test of time and add to a quality built environment, not erode it. A full type 3 design review is a critical part of achieving those goals. Thank you.
Next up, we have Sam Rodriguez.
Hey, Commissioners. I apologize for my voice. I just had oral surgery, so my wife will be very happy to hear that I won't be able to talk to her too much tonight. I want to urge you to please deliberate Amendment 5, and particularly I agree with Tom DeCaro, who just spoke, that design review for affordable housing is just as important as it is for everything else. City planning and good building design is essential for our city. It's essential for the recovery of our city. It's essential for the reputation of our city. I'll tell you a quick story. I had an investor show up. I mean, and mind you, it's been difficult to get them to show up lately, and finally one landed on our city, in our city, and he was, with all the stress that it's under, I think pleasantly surprised of the livability of the city, and that livability and the soft nature of the pedestrian realm, and that is achieved through this process. The design review process is if run properly and staff tries to educate applicants to do that, can actually be done in parallel and should not impact the timeline of projects. Other issues are impacting that now that we need to really address, but design review is a parallel process to the design process. And in its nature, it can slow things down if it's not done right, but if it's done right, it can be done as concurrently to the rest of the design process that's required. So I urge you to, again, to reconsider the whether affordable housing can or should be a part of this process, which is fundamental to the health and the livability, reputation, and the interest other people have in our city, which will come invest and build that housing that we so much need. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Next up, we have Tamara DeRitter, Eli Spivak, and Brian Hoop.
Good afternoon. This is Tamara DeRitter. I'm the chair for the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. Thank you so much for taking testimony today on this important issue. We would love to have a continuance to give us another even 30 days so our land use committee can review the amendments. I can't speak upon the amendments per se as a representative, but I can as an individual. The board, as a chair and a representative, I can tell you that our entire board did vote on supporting the land use and transportation's April 15th testimony in support of the Main Street standards and the idea of creating an overlay district for the historic trolley areas in the downtown and outer, it's called the inner ring of Portland. And with that, I found a section of the comprehensive plan that speaks to this that I really had thought DOZA would pick up on. Policy 3.41, distinct identities. It says maintain and enhance the distinct identities of the inner ring districts and their corridors. Use and expand the historic preservation and design review tools to accommodate growth in ways that identify and preserve historic resources and enhance the distinctive characteristics of the inner ring districts. So based on that, and also the testimony that I did get recorded from the, and submitted to you folks from the Land Use and Transportation Committee, I can say that we are in support of Amendment 5 by Commissioner Mapps, that's Hardesty, Amendment 3 by Commissioner Mapps, and Amendment 8 by Commissioner Wheeler, Mayor Wheeler. And what I'd like to do is expand on Amendment 8 and then add the language of distinct identities in there as a reference to Policy 3.41, because those distinct identities is what we're talking about as preservation and replication for our communities in the future. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Eli Spivak.
Hello, my name is Eli Spivak. I'm chair of the Planning and Sustainability Commission. Thank you for taking the time. I'd like to start with amendment number 2, the makeup of the Design Commission. As you'll see going through the guidelines, the DOZA raises the profile significantly of natural resource management and sustainable building practices. And it's critical to have those expertise resident on the commission to make those calls. We had recommended that there be identified individual people with those expertise. We support City Council making sure that those are part of the mix, but really encourage you when you get to appointments to make sure those skill sets are on the commission. Amendment number 4, we also support. You've gone further than we did, and we appreciate that, to expand the eligibility to affordable housing developments regardless of the source of funding. And I'd like to express appreciation to Rubio and Ryan for withdrawing amendments 5 and 7. I was going to mention on 5, I think I'm going to ad lib for just a moment here. Discretionary review is a powerful tool, and unfortunately, it gets used as a hook to thwart development. And that hook gets used even more often when housing's on the table. And the state of Oregon was prescient on this issue to require that you could apply clear and objective procedures to the development of needed housing. We have to inventory the housing we need and make sure there's clear and objective ways to create it. Now, writing those standards is hard. And we spent months working with the Design Commission and staff to come up with the standards because it's hard to write them. And we believe that we did a good job of that. We're willing to say that we believe in the standards and that the projects that meet those standards would pass design review. Creating that standards process is critical because it ensures that the housing that we've zoned for can actually be created. And so I want to appreciate you to believe in these standards too, because we need those to make sure that the housing that we need in our city so much actually gets built. Thank you.
Next up, we have Brian Hoop.
Mayor Wheeler and members of council, my name is Brian Hoop, Director of Housing Oregon. On behalf of Housing Oregon and the many affordable housing providers involved in the organization, I want to express our support of DOZA and offer further specifics around our thoughts on Amendment number 4. Within the discretionary process, we support Amendment 4 as a way to ensure that regulated affordable housing projects, regardless of their funding source, can participate in public review and input while reducing the timeliness and uncertainty they inherently face. This will help us take full advantage of the zoning incentives for our projects that are built into Portland's multifamily codes. We also want to express our gratitude to you and staff for taking the time to hear our concerns and collaborate on solutions that work for everyone involved. With this, we are open to the proposal to have projects in the city center that are open or that are over 45 feet and those outside the city center over 65 feet participate in a design advice request, recognizing the important connection of early and clear information for projects and efficiency in processing project submissions and permits. However, we want to note that there is a need for affordable housing fee waiver options to be better coordinated, communicated, and integrated into the process. We recognize that is beyond the scope of DOZA itself, but it is a key piece to ensuring the intent of the code amendment is met without creating undue burden on affordable housing projects. So again, we thank you for your thoughtfulness and dialogue that has gone into this process.
Next up, we have Amy Donahue, Kristen Miner, and Linda Nedekoven.
Afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Matz, Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Hardesty. I'm here today to speak about amendment number 4. And just to let you know that I believe very deeply that all projects really should have access to sort of design review. Having gone through that process many times, both for affordable housing as well as for market rate housing, it is an incredibly important aspect of the quality and livability of our city. And I think, speaking of equity, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to live in high quality neighborhoods and high quality buildings. And I do think that design review gives our citizens the opportunity to comment on what is happening in their neighborhoods. But it also makes sure that there is sort of an equitable lens placed on the design, development, and the quality level that should be applied really to places of living within the city of Portland itself. It is something that we have found to be, it does take a little bit of time, but it is well worth that investment. And I think it is something that neighbors across the city really need the opportunity to weigh in on. And I think everyone really deserves the place that we all treasure so much, which is a high quality sort of pedestrian environment with really close-knit neighbors and neighborhoods. So I would strongly urge you to require that process to continue to keep that open to our citizens and make an equitable place. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kristen Miner.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. I'm Kristen Miner. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Commission, and I'm speaking today on behalf of both the Landmarks Commission and the Design Commission on this issue, which is in very strong support of Amendment 8. As a person who spent a decade working for the city, I can tell you that the Bureau of Planning, as it used to be called, has done nationally admired planning work over the decades. Community and area plans require outreach, engagement, block by block work in every corner of the city. It's truly important work. If we as a city don't value this work, the outcome will be losses of diversity, losses of stories, and devaluing of places that we don't even in many cases know were tied to a unique history. Please consider that we will end up with a default character everywhere across Portland. Design review cannot rely on zoning, street classifications, and weak standards alone. Despite what was said by the Planning Commission chair, those standards are weak when it comes to context, and that's what this amendment is about. Without character statement work, guess whose stories and places are lost? The default character here in Portland is very white. It is also very middle and upper middle class. We lose any tools to listen, identify, and value places that have a different identity or story unless we do the work. I beg of you, don't let developers and business interests convince you that deregulation and uniformity is okay. It is not. It devalues, erases, and leaves us all poorer. I also, just for the last statement here, I urge you to listen to the excellent testimony today regarding our public process and Amendment 5. Please bring back discussion of Amendment 5. Thank you.
Next up, we have Linda Nedekoven. Linda, are you able to unmute? Linda, are you having trouble unmuting? Mayor, it looks like Linda may be having trouble with her mute.
Well, let's go on to somebody else, and then when Linda can unmute, I'd love to hear from her.
So Linda was our last testifier.
Of course.
Yeah.
So Linda, can you try *6 and see if that works? Well, let's do this. I don't know. Linda can probably hear us, but if not, Keelan, can you do me a favor and just shoot her an email and let her know that we're sorry. I'm sure that, and it's possible she's also provided written testimony at this point.
Yes, we will do that. Thank you.
Okay, great. And could I ask legal counsel for an opinion, please, because I'm about to close the record, but Linda was signed up and presumably was going to give her testimony. Could we make an exception for her and her alone to provide subsequent written testimony, even if I close the record?
No. So if we go ahead and close the record, it will be closed for everyone. You're going to go ahead and vote on the amendments. I guess I would just say, Linda, it does look like you're on the Zoom call on your computer. The unmute on mine, at least, is in the bottom left to unmute. There's also a chat feature along the bottom of the screen if you want to type into the chat.
Yeah, if she has access to the chat, let's just wait a sec and see if we can see what's going on. I just feel badly she waited all this time to testify.
I understand. Yeah, so Linda, if you're there, now would be the time to at least just write anything into the chat so we know you're out there. It may be that she's no longer at her computer.
Yeah, maybe she's just listening. Okay, good. So, well, then let's do this. Thank you, everyone, for your testimony, including, by the way, everybody who testified via the MAP app. That worked very well. That was a great innovation. We've heard from everybody except Linda, who signed up to testify this afternoon. So the oral testimony is now closed. The written testimony is also now closed. So at this time, we'll begin the process of discussing and voting on amendments in order. We'll just go ahead and start with amendment number 1, which is on the table. Bridges, is there any discussion on amendment 1? Otherwise, I will call the roll. Not seeing anybody raise their hand. Keelan, please call the roll on amendment 1 related to bridges.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hardesty, did you?
I did say aye, I thought.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed it. Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I want to appreciate the work that my colleagues in their bureaus did to help refine the language to specify the types of bridges. That was an improvement. I also want to thank the Planning and Sustainability Commission, particularly our former chair, Kat Schultz, for thinking of an approach whereby our design commission is able to review and advise on bridges. That's an important improvement. I believe the amendment strikes the right balance between a thoughtful, intentional review of new, larger bridges in our city and the potential for small infrastructure projects like culverts to be part of the design review. So thank you everyone who worked on this. I vote aye, the amendment is adopted. To amendment number 2, any further discussion or thoughts? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you. We want to ensure expertise on the design commission, and we don't want to limit our ability to recruit diverse candidates and build inclusive commissions. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I would like to thank Commissioners Ryan and Rubio for developing an amendment that responds to both the PSC proposal and to BDS's staff's ability to recruit and retain candidates for the Design Commission. Well done. I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 3, any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
I'm voting in favor of this amendment because it's optional. If it was required, I would definitely be a no vote. So I vote aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I want to appreciate Commissioner Mapp's approach outlined in this amendment. Support context in our main streets in Portland by adding optional standards to the design standards, as Commissioner Hardesty just mentioned. Thank you to those who testified and wrote to City Council to explain this series of addition to the design standards. There were many of you, and I thought the testimony was extremely helpful. I want to also just acknowledge the passion behind the research, the community engagement, and the drafting behind the Main Street bundle. Thanks to those of you who are involved. I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment number 4. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mayor, I apologize. Can we just take a brief moment? I need to coordinate with Keelan about something that's happened with the testimony. Is there a minute? Can we have like a 3-minute recess? Is that all right?
In fact, that's always a good idea. Colleagues, why don't we make it an even 5 minutes? It's currently 3:38. We'll be back in 5 minutes. We are in recess. Lauren, do you need me for this conversation, or is this Session
Recording in
momentarily.
progress.
And the meeting is now being recorded. We're back in session. So colleagues, apparently what happened was the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability had publicly advertised that the record will remain open until 4 p.m., which is about 16-ish minutes from now. And so what legal counsel advises us is, given that public notification, we have to keep the record open until 4 p.m. And that is, so we could potentially still get written testimony coming in the MAP app. We want to be legal about how we do this. So I would propose, based on what legal counsel has advised us, that we take a break, that we take a recess for the next 15 minutes until 4 p.m. We'll close the record at the appropriate time at 4 p.m. And then, just to make sure that we have our I's dotted and T's crossed legally, we will need to re-vote on the amendments that we have re-voted on. Don't worry, I won't give my speeches twice, but we'll need to formally re-vote on those in the event that any additional testimony comes in the next 15 minutes. So unless there are any objections, seeing none, we are in recess till 4 p.m. Thank you all for your patience and understanding and flexibility.
Mayor, I'm sorry, before we reconvene, I'd like to check in really quick with Open Signal.
Yeah, go for it. And go ahead and start recording again.
Okay, Open Signal, do you know if we have our, oh, I see captions. I think, I just want to make sure we still have our captioner.
Recording in progress.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for confirming.
Okay, great. And Keelan, did the last individual show up before I close the record?
I see Linda's on the line. Let me see if we can get her connected. Linda, can you hear us? It looks like you're unmuted. Oh, I wonder if Linda's having trouble with her audio.
All right, well, we did try. Sorry, Linda, I apologize for that. Technology thwarts us all at one point or another during these sessions, so sorry for that. So we are now closing we're reconvening, obviously, and we are closing oral testimony, and we are also closing written testimony at this particular moment. Just to be on the safe side, we'll go back and revote on the amendments. Could we please call the roll on Amendment 1?
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Amendment 1 is adopted. Amendment 2, please call the roll.
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Again, Amendment 3, please call the roll.
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Amendment 3 is adopted. And I think that's where we left off last time, if I'm not mistaken. So Amendment 4, is there any further discussion on Amendment 4? Seeing none, please call the roll on Amendment 4.
Ryan?
Yes, this is something we've heard consistently through the Permit Improvement Task Force work, that early guidance can save valuable time and money in the long run. I vote aye.
Hardesty?
I want to thank Commissioner Rubio for bringing this proposal forward. It was absolutely vital to this process, and I vote aye.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
I am proud that this council has recognized the dire need for affordable housing in our city. And as a city, we have a responsibility to creating the conditions and the vehicles that allow this expedited work to happen. And this is one way that removes some barriers and helps us achieve that goal. I vote aye.
Wheeler?
I want to thank Commissioner Rubio as well for sponsoring this amendment. Thank you. I also want to thank all of the affordable housing developers and advocates who met with my office and who provided testimony, not just to City Council and staff, but also to the Planning and Sustainability Commission, the Design Review Commission, and to our Bureau staff. We know that housing, especially permanent affordable housing, is a critical ingredient to healthy, safe, and a prosperous city. We need to make it easier to build the things we want to see and the things that enhance everyone's quality of life here in our city. I believe that this amendment helps to support more opportunities for permanent supportive housing. I still want to ensure that those building affordable housing are connected to our permitting bureaus early in the process, and that the applicable code regulations are both communicated and understood. That said, I support this. I vote aye, and the amendment is adopted. Amendment 5 was withdrawn, so to Amendment 6. Any further discussion on Amendment 6? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
I want to take the time just briefly to thank the amazing staff at BPS, Sandra Wood and Phil Namini. They have spent a tremendous amount of time on this proposal. and also these amendments. This is not an easy project to present and develop. Excuse me. And they've executed what is in front of us with a high degree of expertise, precision, and inclusion. So I just want to acknowledge their hard work today. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
I always want to both acknowledge and appreciate the attention to detail that our city employees are bringing to these complex legislative proposals. While these amendments may seem minor in nature, they reflect to me that we have employees who take this work very seriously, reading and editing each and every word and making sure that we get it right. And that is such important work. Thanks to to all of our staff members for preparing these important technical amendments. Thank you. I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. Amendment 7 was withdrawn. That gets us to amendment number 8. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
You know, I guess I'm a little concerned about writing character statements, I will say. And I know and respect the fabulous work of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. But I guess my concern is whose character are we going to actually write into this standard? So I wish I had taken the time to have a more broader conversation. I missed my opportunity to do that, but I am troubled by number 8, and I'm not sure if I can support it today. So I will just vote no today and hope to have some conversations with BPS and the mayor's office before we get to the final vote that is scheduled, I believe, for July 1st, I believe. But at this moment, I will vote no on this amendment.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
From my understanding, and I've been consulting with the Bureau, BPS, closely on this, and this is in alignment with the work that the Bureau is already doing. So I feel comfortable moving forward at this point. So I will vote aye.
Wheeler.
Our city enjoys many quadrants, business districts, and neighborhood with different designs and styles and context. And I believe the city should be supporting ways where we can regularly work with our residents, with our local businesses, our environmentalists, our advocates, to make sure that we're creating a meaningful opportunity to shape both the style and the design of our unique neighborhoods. In response to concerns about the potential misuse of character statements, I want to make it clear that these character statements help our city manage how it grows, adding a hyperlocal context. As we've learned from the McAdam character statement process, a character statement can be a very constructive process for the city to engage a neighborhood, translate guiding principles in design review and standards, and help provide potential developers the local context. I want to thank BPS and Pdx staff for their incredible work on the first character statement in our city and encourage city staff to replicate this process throughout the city. I also want to respond to the testimony of those who advocated for funding in 2 areas of work that BPS staff are currently leading: the Anti-Displacement Action Plan, as well as the Spatial Justice Project. My office has confirmed that BPS staff, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff, are fully funded for this upcoming fiscal year, and these projects are scheduled to continue moving forward. Thanks to those of you who lifted these priorities up in your testimony, and to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff and our community-based organizations like Imagine Black, who are working together to make our city more inclusive and more equitable. I'm very happy to vote aye. The amendment passes. It's adopted. So we have now, colleagues, voted on all of the amendments. The next step is for staff to return to council for us to vote on the amended findings, ordinance, and amended recommended draft. Can we please confirm that the date that we are continuing this to is June 23rd, 2021 at 3:30 p.m. time certain. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Very good. So the item then is continued to June 23rd, 2021 at 3:30 p.m. time certain. Thank you all. And unless I've missed anything, that concludes today's hearing. I believe we're done, correct? Legal counsel, Lauren?
You're good to go.
All right, good. Thank you, everybody. Excellent. Thanks to everybody who testified today. We are adjourned.